This episode of the Beer Bound Podcast is brought to you by Rolling Hops Beer Tours.
Hey everybody, Garrett here from Rolling Hops, as always joined with my partner,
Andy.
We're here to tell you guys about our virtual craft beer tour offering. With what's going on in the world, unfortunately, we haven't been able to run our historical craft walking beer tour, so we've pivoted to taking the virtual experience of craft beer directly to you guys. Wonderful for team building events, corporate events, even just a night out or in, for that matter, with your friends and family. And we're doing this online.
Have any questions about the beer tours or want us to tailor make an event for you? Just shoot us an email or send us a message on any form of social media. Rolling Hops, you can find us everywhere.
RollingHopsBeerTours.com is where you can get a hold of us, and we'll see you guys soon.
Cheers. All right, welcome everyone to an episode of the Beer Bound Podcast. We're excited to be joined by Mark and Krystal, the founders of Katalyst Brewing in Bracebridge, Ontario. Mark and Krystal, they started Katalyst Brewing in 2016. This dynamic couple leading the ship of the brewery are constantly trying to create new and interesting beer recipes while maintaining a stock of classics, including smoked porters, pilsners, and a variety of lagers, while experimenting with sour and barrel-aged beers. We look forward to learning about their particular Muskoka-based brewery. So without further ado, we welcome Mark and Krystal to the Beer Bound Podcast. Hello to you both.
How's it going?
Hello.
Oh, we're
Welcome.
great. We're also joined by the star of the show, Mark and Krystal's four-legged companion, Apollo. Say
Welcome,
hello,
Apollo.
Apollo. All right. Well, we'll get some questions for Apollo in a little bit. Apollo's quiet this evening. All right, Mark and Krystal, maybe you guys can start us off with just a little bit about yourselves, your journey with beer, and a little bit about Katalyst Brewing.
So Krystal actually kind of got me into beer when we started dating many years ago. I wasn't not into beer, but I wasn't really.
I'd say into craft beer.
I wasn't particularly interested, aside from like just drinking it to drink it. And then I just kind of took it one step after another. And it's like, oh, I could probably make this, and then extrapolate beyond that, and you kind of like, oh well, maybe I need more equipment, and then at a certain point you're kind of like, well, let's make this a business, and then you're like, let's blow all our money on it. And so kind of while that was all happening over a period of 5 years, I don't know,
Roughly, yeah.
so somewhere around like 5 years, I was brewing, getting a lot more into it, and I was working in commercial real estate. I wasn't very good at it. I wasn't particularly passionate about it. So at some point, I think about a week before we got married, I quit, and we kind of went full tilt at the brewery angle.
People got some good laughs at the for richer for poorer during our vows. It resulted in howls of laughter.
I could see.
Yeah, imagine, yeah.
But yeah, so we kind of took all that, and we started off as a contract operation. So we brewed a Belgian Saison out of Cool in Etobicoke, sold that to a couple bars and some LCBOs as kind of a proof of concept.
He can see he can see lights of our neighbors coming home across. So
If you'll ignore the dog growling.
Oh, yeah. Now Apollo's talking.
All right.
So when we kind of decided to open up a physical space, we looked around Toronto a bunch, and it was just like
staring down $12,000 to $15,000 a month in rent.
it just got silly, because like you need sort of that 2,500 to 3,500 square feet even for a small brewery. And yeah, sitting there, you're like, okay, your first bill of every month is like 15 grand. That doesn't include labor. That doesn't include utilities. It's like, that's wild. And we were sitting there having a beer one night, and Krystal was just kind of like, well, why don't we look outside of Toronto, which is something I'd never considered. And then we kind of sat there, went from like Parry Sound all the way to Halliburton, looking at different spaces.
We kind of did a lifestyle decision of like, well, do we want to live in Toronto for kind of like the rest of our lives, or do we want to maybe move somewhere else? We really like Muskoka and like that kind of area with like space and all those types of things. So then here we are.
Yeah. And we ended up stumbling onto a really cool sort of grain processing building, which was built in, I think, mid to late 1800s or something like that, and used to be kind of a way station with silos and stuff for it. So really cool old historic building in downtown Bracebridge, which also happened to be the former home of Muskoka Brewery until they moved into their current facility in 2012 or something like that. And yeah, we signed a lease for that dump, and here we are.
It had been abandoned for like
almost a decade
before we moved in. So there was like lots of work that needed to be done. First, much of it was just cleaning stuff out of it.
Yeah, I was like,
that wasn't Muskokas or anything, but just like people had been storing their like boats and construction material and like furniture and like piles of stuff in there.
I'm sure someone was living there too. Like it was a mess. There were like bats in the ceiling, and just it was not great. Because yeah, like the biggest thing that people always say is like, oh well, Muskoka was here. They must have left all the equipment. You just had to turn on the lights.
Straight turnkey.
Yeah, that's pretty much how it worked. It was just turn on the lights. So yeah, we ended up with that space and got open January 2020, which was horrible timing
for being winter in Muskoka, and because it was a couple of minutes before the pandemic.
Yeah, something happened early 2020.
something on there.
Yeah, that's right. So technically, you guys started Katalyst. So you started as a contract brewery in 2016. So that was that was the inaugural.
Yeah, that was sort of the inception of it. Right. But yeah, physical location opened in 2020.
Gotcha. So are you guys Torontonians? Are you guys from Toronto originally?
I was born and raised in Toronto.
Gotcha.
And Krystal was born and raised in Kitchener.
But I've been in Toronto for like 10 years before we moved up here. So.
Right. Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay. So 2020 is when you opened up your actual brick and mortar in beautiful Bracebridge. Yeah. So how has it been so far? Obviously, you mentioned interesting time to open a brewery, but you guys are still here.
It's also kind of like maybe we didn't notice how bad the hit was because there was nothing to compare it to. So we're just like, all right, this is how much we made sales this week. Cool. Great, cool. Like, we made money. All right, awesome.
Yeah, that's kind of the interesting things. People are like, oh well, like you must be fine. Like I don't know what good is. We still haven't had a regular year, so we're like, okay, we're paying bills, so.
My answer is like to how it's going, which is probably the number one question we get asked, which is like an internal eye roll. But like, I'm always like, we're still here. That's my standard answer.
It's a damn good answer.
I don't know. It's a good way to look at
it. But yeah, it's that first, like the first 2 months, you kind of start off and you're like, okay, you're doing whatever numbers and you're doing okay. And you see it start ramping up towards that spring, which is when Muskoka starts to pick up. And then kind of that COVID shutdown initially, we're like, fuck, guess we lost all our money, huh? Better pack it in.
We brewed like a special
we had all the like St. Patrick's Day beers
and like just packaged it all, had it on tap, and then like literally the day of St. Patrick's Day.
It was not a fun St. Patty's last year.
No.
2 years ago.
Yeah, 2 years ago.
No, last year, 2020. Yeah.
It
seems so long.
Sorry.
Two St. Patrick's
Days ago.
Yeah, two St. Patrick's Day 1 year.
Right. That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it was kind of like overnight, like Krystal built out our online platform and we launched the online store within like, I don't know, 24 hours or whatever.
Yeah. So luckily we had plans to actually open the online store kind of in April-ish, like April, like mid-April. So we had taken like all the photos and stuff, and we were like, we shut down, and it was basically like, well, this is happening right now in 24 hours instead of waiting until April.
Yeah.
Push up the timetable just a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, all right, well, I guess this is how we make revenue now.
Yeah. Well, guys, can you tell us, just because some of our listeners are maybe in the city, don't know other locations outside of Toronto, can you tell us a little bit about Bracebridge, a little bit about Muskoka, its appeal to you as a location for opening a brewery, just and a little bit about the area and the town, the city as well?
Sure. So basically, if you get on the 400 and drive about an hour and 45 minutes north, 400 to Highway 11 and about an hour and 45, you'll get to Bracebridge. It's kind of a smallish but mid-sized community up here. There's about 16,000 people. Muskoka in general is well known for being like the prime cottage area of Toronto, where lots of people have all of their second residences, but it's also bordered by like the Algonquin Highlands, Halliburton, and Parry Sound.
Yep.
But yeah, it's a really outdoorsy area where you kind of have 4 seasons of activities up here. And for us, that was kind of really appealing. Just to have just more space and be able to go snowshoeing in the morning, or like go for a mountain bike ride and not have to drive like 45 minutes, an hour, or however long with traffic to go do all that stuff, and have it kind of all in our backyard and be part of that whole lifestyle for us.
Yeah, I mean, and as far as Muskoka goes, your 3 main towns are Gravenhurst to the south, which is your gateway to Muskoka.
It says it on the sign.
It says it on the sign. Then Bracebridge, which is the sort of central town in Muskoka, and then Huntsville, which is kind of your gateway to Algonquin, basically. So Huntsville has a boatload of traffic going to and from provincial parks. Bracebridge is kind of where you flow through, and kind of the beginning of all of it is that Gravenhurst. Like, you get off, you go to Sawdust City, and then you get back on the highway and keep going.
Did that for a long time.
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah, well, Muskoka, what is it about Muskoka that you have such a good and strong craft beer scene going on in the three towns? Is that what you call it? The 3 cities?
Towns, yeah.
I don't know. I mean, like the oldest one is Muskoka, and that's a pretty large operation at this point. Like they're in 75 or 80,000 square feet now. Yeah. So, and they're one of the original craft breweries in the province, or in the country even.
Yeah. And
they're in Bracebridge. So that kind of gives you a good foothold. And like the next one was Lake of Bays, which is 2010 or 2011, I think they started, which they have 3 locations now. So they have 2 brew pubs in the production facility in Baysville. And then
I think the biggest thing with craft beer is that municipalities have seen the success of those earlier adopters, and like how many people they employ and everything now. So when we came in, they were like, we also have Muskoka, which is like employs hundreds of people and is this like does a lot for our community. So let's have another one, and maybe they'll grow to the same size. I'm sure that was their logic, not that but like if we found that they were really, like a zoning change wasn't like this year-long affair and cost $100,000. It was like, go to council and give them a piece of paper, and they're like, cool, yeah, that's fine, open your business. It was a lot.
So there's some stuff that was kind of streamlined in that regard, and that could be it. Like the only other new one would be Canvas. Like they opened a month before we did, I think.
And I think it's also because Muskoka's seen a lot of influx of younger people, so that kind of 25 to 40-ish kind of age range, there's a lot of people that are moving up here and kind of want the same stuff that they had in the city, or they're, same as us, like we're going to do it in the city, really looked hard at the financials, and now they're opening up all their businesses up here. So that's more of a more general answer of like why Muskoka is kind of growing, but you can speak to a bit of craft beer, because a lot of people who are in it are on the younger side, unless you're in like the big bucks, big guys.
Yeah, which from a distribution point up here makes no sense.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, tougher to get it across to other cities, I suppose.
For sure.
Yeah, well, do you see the craft beer culture in Muskoka more as a local entity, or it sort of latches on to the tourist economy that comes in and out of the area?
It's kind of both.
Yeah.
Like you'll notice if you look at all the breweries in Muskoka, all of them have LCBO SKUs. And that's because the winter here is much less robust financially than the summer. So you kind of have that local entity in the off season, but as soon as like you hit that May sort of peak, or not the May start, not peak, you get everyone coming from everywhere to vacation or camp or go through on their way to North Bay or do whatever, and it just blows up. So then you kind of you're getting a lot of distribution that you wouldn't necessarily get if you were in a non-tourist
and
area.
I would also say like there's also a really set of loyal locals that like are craft beer. Everybody has a mug club up here, which is like hit or miss if you have it kind of in Toronto. And like we know all their names, we know them, like we become friends with them, like they come in all the time. And a lot of breweries have that, and a lot of them are members in multiple different breweries, and they're really supportive that way. So I think like the off-season population is just really, really regular, and we see a lot of the same people over and over and over again. And then it's just support, and then it's just boosted in the summer by all the tourists.
Yeah, summer you get your bonus bucks.
Yeah.
That's a good way of putting it, the bonus bucks. I like that. So you said, sorry, like a mug club? Was that what you mentioned, Krystal? Like it's, I guess everyone, is it like a membership at breweries? And maybe I'm not familiar with that.
So you basically pay a yearly fee, and like some of them have all different types of things, but you basically get a dedicated mug. Ours are actually personalized, so they got to choose what was on their mug. So we have people that just have their name. We have people who have we have a mug club member that their glass is Ted, and it's their Newfoundlander's named Ted. So there's like a picture of a Newfoundlander on it with the word Ted. But basically it gives you, at ours anyways, it gives you $2 off a pint every time you come in. It gives you 15% off beer to go and merch. You get a free beer on your birthday. There's a mug club exclusive merch item that only they get. What else? There's free booking of the tap room. It's basically just a set of deals that's open to only mug club members for paying that yearly fee. And it's kind of the same ish across all of them. It's just different incentives or slightly different prices, but it's basically a dedicated mug and that you get to use, and you get discounts for it.
Yeah. Oh, nice. That's pretty cool.
Sign us up.
Yeah, get on the mug club.
We're launching next week for 2022. So
okay.
All right.
We'll look out for it. So how far does one have to go in order to find Katalyst beer, like outside of Muskoka? Where can I find you guys?
Too far. Like we launched our first LCBO SKU 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago.
2 weeks. Not even maybe.
Oh, it's all a blur, Krystal. All a blur. So that's kind of rolling out gradually. Like we're trying to add more stores as quickly as we can. It's just that I only have so much time. So that's like hazy IPA, really, really easy to drink. So you can get that. Well, right now we have a couple in Toronto. Barrie should be coming online shortly.
There's Ottawa, Berks Falls,
Ottawa, kind of all over the place.
Yeah, and if you don't see it, ask for it and get them to bring it in.
And maybe they will, or maybe they'll tell you to get bent.
There's definitely a few beers on your website that I'm certainly curious to try. I want to come back a little bit because I know, Mark, you mentioned, I guess the first beer you started with, you said it was a Saison, which I think is cool because, I would say out of, a lot of the breweries we've spoken with, their first beer is definitely not a Saison. So first, I'm a big fan of Saisons. I'll just maybe preface by saying I think that's awesome. but like Andy mentioned, and on your site, you sort of have that inspiration for coming up with different beer recipes. So I always like to know, what is it that's your inspiration? Like, how do you come up with different stuff to brew?
Some of it is culinary. Like, we have 3 restaurants in the building that we're in. So sometimes they'll be messing around with something. I'm like, huh, that's kind of cool. Or I mean, the opposite way, where I'm like, huh, I'll never ever make something with that in it. Or like some of it is keeping track of market trends. Like the US always tends to be a couple of years ahead of Canada. So you'll see stuff coming out in the States, and like Italian pilsners, for instance, were kind of a thing in the States. There's a few breweries now that have them up here, but you kind of pick up on that stuff. And then other stuff is just people asking, or like people come in and they're like, okay, do you have an IPA? We have a couple. Or do you have this, or do you have that? And sometimes it's stuff like, do you have a wild fermented whatever? And I'm like, yeah, like maybe once a year. Like we've done a couple spontaneous beers and stuff like that, but you have to kind of nail when you launch that up here. Otherwise, you will sit on it for an eternity. So yeah, they come from all over the place, and sometimes like we've done beers for people's anniversaries or for people's children, not for the event surrounding people's children, not for people's children. Like the child's IPA. Children. Oh.
Like we'll brew a custom beer and it ends up being really popular, so it kind of becomes part of the rotation, or someone gives us a good idea, like.
Or even like, every once in a while you'll get samples of different flavorings or ingredients sent to you from random suppliers, and you can try it. Like we'll pull off a sample off of one of the tanks, dose it in, and be like, oh, that's amazing, or this is horrible. Which,
And then there's also a heavy dose of what people will drink and buy.
Yeah, that's always kind of the crapshoot, is like, you can brew something and you can sit there and be like, oh, this is going to be amazing. People are going to love this. And then you release it and it takes you a week for anyone to even know it's in the fridge. So it's all over the place, I guess.
A little bit of this, a little bit of that. I guess like anything in life, it could be sort of hit and miss. I like what you mentioned about trends, and actually to your example of Italian pilsners. We've actually had that question asked a few times, like, what the heck is an Italian pilsner? And for the most part, I just say it's like a German pilsner, but they hop the crap out of it. But I think they're great, and it's a little bit of a trend. Do you see any trends starting up now, or anything that's the most current that maybe you could identify?
I mean, the big thing, depending on the brewery, slushy beers are huge right now. They're always risky to do depending on your market, because if you have that market that you can sell it to really quick, great. If not, you've got a pallet of can bombs.
Right.
It's basically, like, for anyone listening that doesn't know, a slushy beer, you're taking raw fruit puree, throwing it into a finished beer, and you're packaging it instead of throwing it in, fermenting it out, and then packaging it. So you have all this 100% fermentable fruit puree with live yeast going into a sealed container. So there's lots of breweries that do it really well. But pipe bombs. Yeah, and that's the thing. And it's been like, what is it? Is it 460 North or whatever the brewery is in the States that does nothing but pretty much slushies?
Yeah.
They're all over the place. Like they'll release like 15 slushies at a time, and that's kind of what they do. Like that's one that gets a lot of media attention. Lagers are coming back, which is awesome, because that's what we tend to do the most of. Like we've got 10 taps in the tap room, and I think 6 or 7 of them right now are lagers.
Wow.
Oh, nice.
And then like a pale ale or IPA, not a pale ale.
Ooh. Yeah, it's a seltzer and an IPA.
So it's like, so lagers are definitely coming back.
I think like what we're trying to do is show that like a lager isn't just like a very pale, American light lager Budweiser type thing. Like there's a huge range of things that you can do with a lager that are from that very light and pale to a very nice and like nice dark lager. So
well, I mean, like people come in all the time and we try and guide them, right? Because I find some places are not douchey isn't the word, but like
when someone comes in and they're like, I like a lager or I like an ale,
or
we're like, okay, well, but like let's talk about that. Like,
well, yeah,
what
like,
do you like about it so that we can help.
Like the only two styles of beer in the world.
Well, that's the thing. And like trying to explain to people, or like people come in and I'm like, so what do you drink? They're like, oh well, you're not gonna like it. Like I had a guy tonight at the bar being like, you're not gonna like it. I drink Coors. I'm like, no, that's fine. You're letting me know what you like. Like, do you like it? Would you like something sweeter? Would you like something drier? Like I have 7 similar type beers for you to choose from. And you can kind of guide them like that without making them feel uncomfortable in the space.
Right.
Which
because we're like, there's piles of people up here who are very like craft beer well versed, but there's also lots of people who are like trying a lot of that stuff for the first time and like, or just kind of approaching it. They kind of know what they like, maybe at 2 or 3 or 4 craft breweries, but like they're trying other ones. So we want to make it like welcoming and approachable.
Yeah, like you want their first or one of their first experiences in craft beer to be something that they look back at and they remember. They're like, oh, that guy was helpful or she was helpful. And they really went out of their way to make sure that whatever I purchased was something that I would enjoy without kind of alienating me because I drink Coors. Like, and at the end of the day, we're trying not to alienate any portion of the market.
Yeah.
Like,
we like everyone.
Yeah.
You drink beer, comes, yes.
If you've made it into the brewery, I'm going to sell you something. Unless you're looking for something I don't have.
Sure.
I'll still try and sell you something.
Now, is the interest in lagers, is that a Mark and Krystal thing, or is that an intelligent business strategy in terms of, well, craft lagers there is a lot more interest from the consumer towards them, or is that something you guys are particularly keen on producing?
A little bit of both. Like
I definitely like the light stuff more for sure.
Not all lagers are light, Krystal.
I know, but I mean like light tasting, light bodied, light, like not super hoppy, sour, triple, something thick, whatever.
Thick.
Well, slushies are like, I don't know. Anyway,
they do have some viscosity to them.
Have you guys made a slushy beer?
No.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing, and that's why we're also cognizant of like, if I put fruit puree into a beer that poured out of the can like a protein shake, I think we'd probably sit on it for a bit.
We would. Yeah, I would.
Well, it's interesting, like with like a couple years under it now.
Like even there is, Muskoka does have a slushy. It says like slushy, but it's just a lactose-based beer. Like it's not actually like that fruit thing.
They have a slushy?
They call it a slushy, but it's not traditional in that like
the traditional slush style
slush
for like a year and a half.
Okay, well, but I mean, what you think of?
Like maybe we do a very small batch of it. Like sours sell really well in the summer, don't really move much in the winter, but most of even getting that sour with really, really vibrant fruit puree. Like we did a pink guava kettle sour that was really nice, but from sort of that July to September, that stuff flies. And then you get into the colder months, people are like, I don't really want something that reminds me of tropical vacation.
But like the lager thing, to get back to your question, has just kind of been like over time, it's been stuff that like you're good at brewing. It's worked well. It's sold well. It's done well. And we've just kind of like expanded what style we were hitting. And they kind of just morphed into that. Like it wasn't.
Yeah. Like there seems to be a comfort level for certain people when they come in and they see lager on the board. They're like, so they might start with that light lager that we have and be like, oh, what's an Italian Pilsner? Or what's a dark lager? Like, what's the difference? And every time they come in, they get a little more adventurous. You're expanding their palate while still being within that lager category that they feel safe with, and kind of making them realize that there's a huge amount of varieties within that category.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. That's a great thing about craft beer. And that's kind of our mandate overall is, there is so much to beer, and craft beer does a great job of showcasing that. You don't have to go just from your buds and your Molsons all the way to a thick, juicy IPA.
Yeah.
There are points in between, and it's just a matter of, finding a few and giving them a shot, and then, sky's the limit and how you go from there. So yeah, we totally agree.
You guys tell us a little bit about, you mentioned that you started as a contract brewery and then eventually made your way into having your actual physical location in Bracebridge. Could you tell us a little bit about that experience? Because there is we've heard a lot of different brewery owners talk about, you can start sort of dip your feet in a little bit, and learn a little bit by starting a contract brewery first. But then we've heard a little bit of criticism on the other side of, like there's so many contract breweries, don't start another contract brewery. And like sort of a little bit of resentment from the actual brick and mortar locations of saying that, that you're not a real brewery. Maybe that's a bit of an overstatement. But if you're a contract brewery, like that's, you should really have a location. But then there's what you guys did was sort of get your feet wet a little bit and then move into a space. Like, could you have done what you did in Bracebridge, opening up an actual brick and mortar without that experience from having a contract brewery?
Yes,
because we had a Toronto-based beer that had no relevance to where we moved, and it didn't matter.
I think like what it gives is it gives you some perspective. There's different kind of levels of contract brewing and different models for it. There's a few breweries that have done kind of that successful, get your name out there a little bit, build some sales, and go into a physical location. The most successful was probably like Woodhouse, which was everywhere. And now they actually have their brew pub in Toronto. But it's probably more, 30, I think. Yeah, it's probably more of like a good from an experiential standpoint, because it just, we're in the LCBO with it. We kind of got a handle on how that side of stuff works. And that's helped us now that we're back in the LCBO again. But in terms of like making any money off of contract brewing, that's a pipe dream unless you're dumping 150 grand into marketing.
I think contract brewing's morphed a little bit too. Like there used to kind of be like where people did that, where they, started contracting with the intention to build into bricks and mortar.
Yeah.
And I feel like now contracting is a means to an end in itself. Like there
seems to be like
definitely
a model,
examples that like that is the model. Like that's what they're doing. They're spending a lot of money. There's marketing behind it.
I think there's a model now where you can contract brew and you can kind of be like, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to, like, as you said, do marketing. And there's a few brands that have done that wildly well, like Ace Hill and Lost Craft have both done it. And like some people have very divisive opinions on both, but
can't argue that they're making money.
Well, you don't know if they're making money.
Okay.
You can't see their books, but if you can go by the LCBO sales, which you can find if you know where to look, and it's very much.
Well, they have to have a lot of sales because they have piles of SKUs and they don't let you have piles of SKUs.
Yeah.
You have piles of sales.
But yeah, from a business perspective, good on them. And I think there's more contract breweries starting up that are trying to emulate that, which if you can emulate that, great. But it's not as easy as I think many people, you got to hustle basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I mean, maybe if we were in Bracebridge with a beer here, people knew us here, and then we opened here. But like, we were in Toronto, had a contract brand in Toronto, and then moved up here. So I guess maybe it helped some people in Toronto who maybe knew us when we opened up here, especially with COVID and the whole online ordering. Like, we did tons of runs to Toronto for like free delivery and stuff. So that was probably helpful from that perspective. But there wasn't necessarily a direct correlation between.
I don't know. It seems to have gone kind of just like when we were contracting. There were a couple examples of people that had gone from, or breweries that had gone from contracting to physical location. And like at that point, Left Field had just opened their facility and they were contracting before that. And there were folks like that, like Long Slice did the same thing. So there were a couple examples in very close timelines to us. So we're like, oh, okay, this kind of makes sense. Just proof of concept, I guess. But it seems to have changed slightly.
Yeah, it's interesting. Do you think it's kind of, this is getting a little bit artsy fartsy philosophical, but do you think it's betraying the culture a little bit to just be a contract brewer? Like part of the craft beer culture is affiliated with the actual experience of the actual location, I think, and having
I personally don't have an issue with it.
All right,
I don't have an issue with it because like for all the big guys that you see, I also know some very little guys that are like really hustling and are really small and are kind of doing the contract thing because it's like they financially can't afford to do the whole brewery thing. They don't have time, or like it's not like, maybe they're just not at that point in their life where they want to do it, but they still really want to be involved in beer. So there's kind of like two sides to it. I guess in any industry, there's always the like behemoth that is like, very corporate and big, but then there's also all the little guys that are still doing the same thing. Like,
I think where you hear a little bit of like flack or pushback on contract brewing is it's basically people fearing competition, right? Which isn't unfounded. There's a boatload of competition. Like at the small little LCBO in Bracebridge, there's like 50 IPAs. It's a town of 16,000. Like that's obscene. Like 50.
It's a lot.
Like over 2 cases full. It's just insane. But with that said, I think the ones that'll probably have the best sales will eventually be the best ones, followed by probably the ones that are paying the most in marketing. But yeah, like more contract breweries, I think you see a lot of them that last 6 months, 8 months, get sold, get bought out, the SKU gets sold, whatever, and they kind of evaporate. And you could list off 5 or 10 of them that happen to, but the ones that have kind of a long-term plan, I think it's fine.
Fair enough. The strong will survive.
Yeah, like the free market.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, you mentioned, Mark, about, I think you both mentioned about marketing, obviously, contract brewing, potentially not viable unless you have a pretty substantial marketing budget. Can I ask your take on marketing? Obviously, there are an ample collection of craft breweries all across the province, not to mention the country. How do you guys stand out amongst the plethora of competition, healthy competition? But how do you guys differentiate yourselves from the other craft breweries in Muskoka or in Ontario or Canada?
Do we?
Great question. We'll get back to you next week.
All right. Cliffhanger question.
No, I mean, we kind of focus on the local marketing aspect of it, mainly that up here, like that local population, that's what's getting you through the slow months, like in the off seasons. And that's kind of what you want to
I guess
support you.
Yeah, that's kind of maybe our differentiating factor or whatever, is that we've spent a lot of time building those local relationships, and we know like our mug club members and regulars, and we like, we're friends with them and they know us, and like we're really close to like the ownership of our brewery. And like we're in the tap room every day. We're the people serving your beer or like buying your beer to go. And sometimes people are really surprised that they're like,
sometimes
are you guys the owners?
In the back when he breaks stuff.
Like they're surprised that they're like, we're also doing all of the like front facing stuff that they see. So I guess being really close to, getting to talk to the brewer and talk to the owner and talk to the person who does the cans and like the website and stuff is, I guess, a little bit.
You're different. A little closer to the product, I guess.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's something wholesome about that too, right? You're not just ruling from your roost, but you're actually down there, you're getting, doing everything, have your hands in every fast food
and that's
operation.
been a little bit of a result of COVID, is that like that's kind of been the like, all right, well, we're gonna be real slim and lean and we're gonna do all this stuff and like that's how we're gonna survive.
Yeah, I mean, like, thankfully we've started getting to the point now where we've hired a couple people on and we're trying to hire a few more. But
cool.
For most of COVID, it was kind of like, well, we should probably lean this out because it's gonna get worse. And it's just like, all right, well, let's avoid doing any of this. But yeah, I mean, we're just kind of, I guess, close to the product would be the best way of differentiating it. Product's good.
It's really interesting to listen to what people say when they don't know who you are, because there's people are real honest and you're like, all right, cool, thanks.
Yeah, that's true. Take all perspectives.
Like, oh, right, geez, that was, and every once in a while, like, I'll be bartending, like, I brewed it. Just shut your mouth. Just calm down.
Get some pretty formal, honest responses. Eh? Whether
Yeah,
you like them or not.
while.
It's not a very regular thing, but it's like, it's kind of interesting, I guess, when they just think you're, you just work here.
Yeah, you're just the tap room worker.
Like, oh,
Not that they're not important, but like they're not personally offended by anything.
That's the hardest part to actually, like, when someone has negative feedback, which happens with every business, you're sitting there and you're like, you fucker. and you want, like, you're trying to be professional, but you're like, no, that's good. I know that is. That other customer said so.
Or even like going back to marketing, we were at the Bracebridge Farmers Market all summer, which was actually a really great thing to do. And so I was working it and someone came up to me being like, you guys are terrible at marketing. I've never heard of you. And I was like,
oof, ouch.
I was also like, in my head, I was like, can you turn around and look at this market? How many businesses here have you heard of? Have you heard of like the card lady that's beside me, or like the like crepe shop that's over there, or like the guy who sells tables? Like, I don't like this.
It's a farmer's market. Like, do you know all your farmers?
Yeah. Well, ironically, part of being at the market is to market yourself, and that woman discovered you at the market. So
actually, we're wrong. Like, people coming up, the farmer's market's a wild place because people will come up and they'll stand like 6 feet from your booth and talk about you, but not facing you, assuming that because they're not right at the counter that you can't hear anything they're saying. And you're just kind of like, oh, okay. Well, all right.
You're just staring at them as they speak about you. Yeah.
Sitting there awkwardly.
It is being like, the market was like being like a zoo animal where they're all like pointing and staring, but like, and talking, but like, you can't, you're just,
because
waiting.
People just come by and they're like, oh yeah. It's ridiculous. It's good.
That's funny.
So it was great. We sold a lot of beer, but it was
a lot of beer, experience. But it's you're definitely in a bit
experiences.
Of a yeah, I'm sure. We get a mixed variety. I mean, this is pretty typical. It's pretty typical for folks who are in the ownership, entrepreneurial role of craft beer to have some links with family members. So I always like to find out. We get lots of different takes on that. Maybe if someone was going into creating a craft brewery with a family member, what would you guys, any pieces of advice you would give them in terms of maybe?
No.
I'm a family member, though, technically.
You're a family member.
But I think that's what he's getting at. Is like something.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, like with your wife?
Yeah.
Oh, no, that's great.
Mark, good.
Let me re-answer that. That's fantastic. No, we get along relatively well. Like, we certainly have days where we say stuff to each other that's less than kind.
But I think if you met us, if you knew us really well, like the way things we say stuff, it's like you just say it and then it's like it's done. But I think we have very distinctive lanes. Like Mark doesn't know anything about like Illustrator or the website or like
I don't care.
or like really you use social media, but like not really. And like I don't really know anything about like the hardcore science of brewing. And like so we kind of have these like distinctive lanes where I can tell you what the beer tastes like and Mark can tell me if the label's ugly, but like it's still kind of like this is my role and this is yours. So it complements each other and we kind of don't really cross into a ton of like feeling really strongly about the way each other does stuff.
Yeah, like it's kind of funny because like I'll go to Krystal sometimes. I'll be like, oh yeah, so I broke this today. It's like $5,000 to replace it. I'm just kind of looking for approval. And she's like, so
yeah, he'll be like, this is this much money. I'm like, do we need it? We have to have it. Or well, then cool. Like I guess let's buy it.
But yeah, I think going into business with a family member, it could definitely change the dynamic depending on who that family member is. Like if you have a parent that's putting in 100% of the money for the business, then your parent kind of becomes your boss. But in our case, I
think it's also different if you're going in there and they're also so 100% involved like we are, like we're both so involved in the business versus someone who just puts in some money and like maybe has a couple opinions here and there and doesn't really see the day-to-day or understand why you have to do XYZ or why this works and that doesn't work and like doesn't know the ins and outs. Those are probably two very different dynamics that would change.
True.
Well, it kind of blends into, this is a similar question, but how obviously running a business, something that's very labor intensive, but just time intensive, such as a brewery, like how do you guys split up time, say even in a week? Is it just sort of full steam ahead 7 days a week?
We start with a list on Monday. And then 17,000 things happen contradictory to that list.
And then you get none of your list done.
And then we do all of that. And then we get none of the list
done.
Yeah,
that's great.
You get a fresh list for next week.
That sounds like what my week is.
All right. You guys are in you guys agree in that.
Yeah. Like I love to get stuff done that we need to get done. But like I was supposed to brew 2 or 3 times last week. I didn't brew at all because I got in Monday. I was supposed to package. We blew a solenoid on our filler. So I had to take that all apart, phone the manufacturer, try and get that fixed, get parts sent out, have a meltdown in the tank house, clean up from my meltdown. And then like, I think I finally brewed on Saturday. Yeah, I think I brewed on Saturday. And so that was from like the Monday schedule. That's how far it got pushed to like when I actually had to do what I was going to do 6 days earlier.
And it's also like, there's always a huge list, but then at some point you're like, we're just going to watch TV because like we're not going to do anything. Like you just need to not do stuff sometimes.
Yeah
like, sure. Sometimes you just need a break. Absolutely.
When we opened the brewery, we lived like a 5-minute walk down the street from it. And now we're like a 15-minute car ride, which is
it's better separation.
Much better separation. We're not there as much, still there a ton, but you're not just sitting there. Right. Great.
Yeah, I can understand.
Good divide for sure. I know we're sort of coming up on the hour mark. I did want to ask you guys about I guess the tab on your website says custom beers, which I thought was pretty cool. Is you guys do like a couple things like batch testing and custom labels and things like that. So was that sort of like something you wanted to do from the beginning? Was it added on because of demand? Like how did that evolve?
A little bit of both. Like we'd always thought about doing it, and there's other breweries that do it as well. But we bought, like we have a pilot system. So our regular system's 10 hex system. So that's 1,000 liters, which is relatively small in terms of craft beer. But our pilot system is 150 liters. So that gives us the opportunity to make someone a batch of beer that's maybe like 300 pints all the way down to about 150 pints. So a couple kegs worth. So we've had small breweries that are starting up, or home brewers that are trying to scale up their recipe so that they can kind of either work on their recipes to do their own breweries, brew beers and kind of test it out and be like, oh, well, that was horrible. Or
that was great.
That was great. We've done some cool stuff, sort of commissioned batches for different places in the area, like some bars and stuff doing their own custom beers. So they can brew it at our place and then they can get their own labels for the cans and everything. And they can sell it as blank bar lager, blank bar IPA. And it will end up netting them more money. And also that whole batch of beer is something that we don't have to sell. Like it's pre-sold before it's even brewed, which is really the nice part about it. And then, yeah, we do some stuff for weddings and things like that as well.
The website just kind of solidified, like we were getting that ask. And so we were like, well, we're doing it. There's demand for it. Let's put it formally on the website. So then if someone's looking, they know that we do it.
Yeah. And it gets people thinking about stuff like, oh, wow, we could make our own beer and we could serve it at our wedding or whatever. And that's great if you can make beer, but if you can't, like, you might be able to do it at home. But if you can't make beer and you're trying to make beer for your wedding, it's definitely going to
probably not the first time you should be trying home brewing.
Yeah, no kidding.
So yeah, you can just pay us and we'll work with you, develop a recipe. And
especially now that events might be coming back, we can do some actual in-person stuff.
Oh, we've had a couple events and it's weird.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, getting back and socializing with people like we did eons ago, it seems, has been taking a little time to get used to it. Like we ran a few of our. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just saying that we had Muskoka Oktoberfest, and that was kind of like the first like lineups packed, like live music, food, and we were like, oh, it's like it's regular time with massive vaccination checks, but like regular time.
Yeah, like you still have to line up and get checked and stuff, but I mean, if that's what we have to do to be able to put people in the tap room at any sort of reasonable capacity again, I'm all for it. Like,
yeah, for sure.
It's a business.
Small price to pay for some good old-fashioned socializing.
Yeah, like it was nice, like people talking to each other at tables, like meeting people, like what events used to be like, which awesome.
Absolutely.
Yeah, hopefully we get a lot more soon. Like Garrett mentioned, we're coming up on the hour. I like to always ask our guests a little bit about a futuristic question. You guys are obviously really young, having young yourselves, but also young in terms of having a young brewery. Do you guys really, obviously still new in the game, relatively speaking, do you guys focus on having a bit of a game plan, wanting to do something in the near future, like setting goals for like, we want to be here 2 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now? Or is it really kind of every day is go, go, go. And it's more of a go big or go home mentality every day, without such a game plan in terms of looking towards.
It depends kind of on the day, I guess. But there's a lot of days where you're kind of so far into the grindstone that all you can do is think about like how to get through the day. But with that said, there's like, I know that we want to buy a bunch of like 30 hect tanks. We currently have 10s, like 5s and 10s, so that we can actually expand the lager program even more. We want to get, like, we're bringing in some barrels in a couple of weeks, which I haven't actually told you about yet.
Cool.
I'm
not really sure where those are going, but all right.
I've got it all worked out. It's fine. So, we have some barrels coming in, which will be used for some spontaneous beer. So we'll do that in a cool ship, which
Cool.
is coming up with our good buddy Matt from Reverence Barrel Works in the back of his tiny little pickup truck. Then we'd also like to get some lagering tanks and stuff like that. Just a bunch of stuff aimed at more process and expanding our distribution, because we're kind of expanding into our custom beers for bars, which has been going relatively well at this point. And some of that is getting hard, especially since most of what they're ordering is lagers, which we don't do any quick lagering. It's all like 6-week lagering. So we're getting to the point where we can't really satiate the demand with the size fermenters that we have. Like, it's kind of like just blowing through that fermenter before the 6 weeks, which makes it very, very difficult to plan anything. Like, we only have 6 fermenters. So
Yeah, I think like because COVID's turning the corner, we can get back to that like where we're going and less of the like, all right, cool. Are we shut down this week? Are we open this week? What are we doing this week? What's going to be next week?
But I mean, a big thing for future planning for me from the equipment side and the production side is that like all our fermenters are Chinese, and ordering anything from overseas is like just excruciatingly painful for shipping now. So that's kind of been, I don't know, we'll see how that goes over the next however long. And then go from there, I guess. I don't know.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I love it. Well, Mark, Krystal, thank you so much for joining us on the Beer Bound podcast. We hope to have you on again, maybe next year sometime.
Yeah.
I think we learned a lot. Obviously, Garrett and I, we'd love to visit maybe next summer. We'd love to make the little trip up and visit you guys if you'll have us.
Best time.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that'd be great.
All right, Mark and Krystal from the Katalyst Brewing in Bracebridge in beautiful Muskoka. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Cheers.
Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all our interviews and beer-related content. Remember, craft beer is here.